There are so many of us committed to improving the lives of the youth in our communities. The In It for Youth podcast is a place for us to come together, from professionals who work with and serve youth to those that champion issues affecting children, to community advocates and stakeholders, and insightful young minds too. The In It for Youth podcast is a tapestry of voices united by a dedication to youth well-being and empowering the young generations of today and tomorrow. I'm your host, Jamie Gale, and I'm so glad you've joined me on this team that is in it for youth. Hello, and welcome back to the show. Today's episode is a really exciting one. I am joined by a duo that runs a company working to make a difference in the lives of kids and families through their very cool products. Today, I'm joined by Abbie Pabon and Emily Enstad. Abbie and Emily co-founded Present Not Perfect, an e-commerce children's brand, in the fall of 2021, and it has grown so quickly. Together, they create art and sensory play kits that teach early emotional literacy skills and empower the next generation of mindful, creative, and resilient kids. I love that so much. Their mission is to create hands-on tools for parents, caregivers, and educators to work with children in supporting mental health, wellness, and the power of a playful metaphor. Abbie is a certified elementary school special education teacher and a mom of 2, and Emily is an art therapist and a licensed professional counselor and a mom of 3. I am so excited to talk with this team. Not only is it so great to connect with other entrepreneurial moms, but a large portion of my work life is spent running a kids yoga company where I work hard to nurture the same skills in kids as their company does. So this conversation is really near and dear to my heart. Emily and Abbie, welcome to the podcast.
Wow. Hi. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much. That was an awesome intro and gave me kind of chills to hear it all put together like that. So thank you.
You guys deserve it. You are amazing. So I'd love to learn more about your company and your products. Can you fill listeners in on all that you offer?
Yes, absolutely. We make art and sensory play kits for families. We usually say ages 3 and up. We've had customers as high as age 90 reach out to us and say they've loved using our kits, but primarily they're for children and their families. Each of our kits teaches an emotional literacy skill through the power of playful metaphor, like you said. So, for example, 2 of our best-selling kits are our unicorn kit, which is all about the topic of self-worth and learning what makes you unique and learning to love yourself. And our other bestseller is our dinosaur kit, which is all about anger and what makes you feel like roaring like a dinosaur or stomping like a dinosaur and learning some healthy coping skills for managing big feelings.
I love it.
And our kits are made with all natural homemade Play-Doh in a container that we actually designed ourselves. So it's like one of a kind double jar. So you have the Play-Doh or the sensory sand on one side. And then, as Abbie was saying, the themed pieces then will go on the other side. So a kid can get them out and play with them in a way that they want to. There's really no rules to it. It encourages just mindful exploration and open-ended play when they engage with the pieces.
I love that. So how do the kits tie? You know, you were mentioning that it's tied to a goal like the unicorn one about being unique and self-love. And how does the packaging come with instructions on that? Or how do families know how to use it in a way that promotes the aims that you guys intended?
Yes, each kit comes with an included mini booklet or tag inside of the kit that we've created through the teacher and therapist lens that has some kid-friendly language, little playful story that families can read together or educators can read together with their kids, and some prompts to extend their play and extend the learning. So it could be anything from discussion questions. It could be an extension art activity that they could do as well. Something they could do with the kit, with the pieces, a challenge or a problem to solve. And it really helps try to tie it all in together with that mini booklet.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. And my mind is like racing because I'm like, oh my goodness, there are so many ways that we could collab. My entrepreneurial mind is like, all right, we need to come together. One of the kids yoga activities that I do with especially the younger age is I have this dinosaur puppet and we do dinosaur breathing with, and I call her Dina the dino. And There's a collab in the making. I know that. I know there is.
You speak our language.
I love it. I love it. So you both come from youth serving professional backgrounds. And so I'm hoping you can just share a little bit about the inspiration behind your company and how each of your career paths led you to this point.
Yeah, so this is Emily. And so I have been a practicing art therapist since 2015. And, pre-children, I worked in a variety of settings. My first experience being in a behavioral health hospital where I was an art therapist working primarily with teens and young adults, using art in a way for them to express what was difficult to verbalize. And I saw such tremendous healing and power using that modality with that population. And so since that first experience, I did some other work in community settings. So going into homes and working with kids and teens, again, using art as the primary modality for healing and self-expression. And then when I had my own kids, just noticing how play was such a big part of our day and something that I felt not only grounded my child or my children, like in a way that kept them more regulated using art or sensory play, but also for me then feeling like I was getting benefits from doing those same things with them. So if we were doing an art activity, if we were doing sensory play, I felt that we were both engaging in regulation essentially together. And so that was like a really cool thing. So there were all these moving pieces. And then the pandemic happened. And it was the first time I think that as a collective society, we all went through the same thing. We all experienced an increase in anxiety. And so those opportunities for regulation and play became so much more important and needed in my own home. And then Abbie and I connected about similar things that we were experiencing. And then it really came to light. So I don't know, I'll let you kind of share more about your background.
Yeah, I can jump in. Emily and I actually have been friends since high school, and we both lived in the same small town just outside of Madison. And at the time of the pandemic, I had my second baby March 11th, 2020. So like the day right before the world shut down. And Emily was pregnant with her second in 2020 and also welcomed her second son in November of that year. And so we really connected. We would having chats 6 feet apart on a porch outside throughout the pandemic. And I was experiencing some personal postpartum anxiety for the first time. And I felt like Emily could really understand some of those topics that I was going through. And we just connected from both our professional backgrounds, her in therapy and me in education, about exactly what she was saying, how we see these topics coming up in our own homes, and how anybody who's a teacher or a professional out there knows that, with your own kids is like a whole different beast, right? As opposed to when you're in the professional setting working with other people's kids. And that really surprised me because that's my life. I've always worked with kids since I was 14 years old. That's what I've loved to do. And I didn't expect the challenges and the mental health anxiety that I was going through. And so finding ways, hands-on tools and resources that families can use and combining our backgrounds was something we didn't exactly know how it would look in the beginning, but we knew we were passionate about this topic and supporting families' mental health through something they could hold in their hand and do with their kids in a time that we were all experiencing a lot of anxiety with a global pandemic.
Okay, so first of all, backing up, you both had babies. It's the middle of a pandemic. Like, props to you for saying, oh, you know what we should do right now? Start a product-based business, because that must have been so many additional challenges with supply chain and everything like that. So if this were a business podcast, I'd ask you a million questions about that. But the fact that you, at a time when touch was so lacking in our worlds, we couldn't touch each other. We couldn't, just the amount of sensory input that we were experiencing as individuals because we weren't leaving our homes as much or we weren't touching each other, all of that you chose to put your focus on creating something that involved touch is really so beautiful. And I hadn't put those pieces together until just this moment, that the timing of when you started your business, which I obviously knew, but I That's really beautiful and a piece that I hadn't considered. And so major props to you for taking that impactful plan on in the midst of global unrest. And also your families were changing so much at that time too. So that's really, really beautiful.
Thank you.
So I'm someone who works in the yoga and mindfulness and social emotional space. And I absolutely love that you're working to foster emotional literacy. And that concept is definitely much more out there in the ether now than ever before. And that's so wonderful. But I'm hoping that you can break it down for listeners who might not be as familiar with this concept. Like, what is emotional literacy and what are the goals? That you mentioned a few about the unicorn and the dinosaur, but just hoping for maybe someone who's listening who doesn't have a background in this particular area of working with youth. What does that mean?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think this is a concept that, Abbie and I, and as we talk about it, are always like, gosh, I wish we would have learned this when we were growing up. And I'm sure we did at certain points in our life, but it wasn't a hot topic as it is right now. And so emotional literacy, I like to think of it as, it really lays the foundation for everything that someone is going to do in life. If you don't know how to identify emotions, if you don't know how to regulate emotions, be in tune with other people's emotions, it's going to be really hard to excel in school or to have, as positive peer relationships, or even further on, like succeed in the workplace. So it's really such an important groundwork, we feel, for all children and adults to be emotionally literate or have emotional literacy skills. And so as we are developing our products, we really like to look at topics that we feel cover the basics of emotional literacy. So as I mentioned, emotional identification, helping kids check in with their bodies and identify what physically might be coming up and put names to those emotions, noticing in books or in role playing what someone might be feeling based on their facial expressions or other clues that we like to kind of tune kids into. So the emotions piece is really big, is just identifying emotions. But then we like to also focus on then, okay, once we identify those emotions, what can we do with them in a healthy way that is going to more likely increase the chances of getting what we need out of the situation or making sure the relationship stays intact. And so goes along with some of our kits about anger, using other skills to tolerate uncomfortable feelings. And another big topic that we like to talk about with our products and our kits is mindfulness. So again, just other ways to connect more with the emotions you might be feeling.
That was great. And I do think that this is one of those concepts that people, they've heard the words, people that are working in the industry, we truly understand it because we see it happening and we see kids building the skills, and then we see what the results of that are, and adults building the skills, because that's something that adults will need to work on as well. We see it, but other people that don't work directly in this industry, it's like they kind of know generally what it is, but they can't put it into words. So your explanation was super helpful. So it must feel really great to know that your products are making a difference for kids and families. And I'm just curious, what are you hearing from parents or educators that are using your art and sensory kits with kids about their impact?
Yeah, we have received a lot of great feedback from parents, grandparents, like I said earlier, adults, teens using our kits, and professionals and educators who use them in a professional setting as well. We have many classrooms that like to keep kits stocked on their shelves, or school counselors or therapists that are using them in sessions with kids. And I think what surprised us the most, we're our product's biggest champion. We use them all the time in our home because we created it, and our kids have been really involved and inspire many of the themes and the ideas, that even the emotional skills that we're working on in our own homes with our kids. So we know we use them all the time. We did a focus group early on just to kind of get some feedback about how the products were being received. And one thing that at least surprised me to hear from almost everyone in the focus group, parents were using the kits at least 3 times a week. They were pulling these kits out and playing with them repeatedly over and over each week. So it's definitely not like a one and done type toy or product that sometimes if you do a coloring book, you color it and then, okay, we're done. We can't color that page again. This is something that people can pull out again and again and continue to play with and continue to have story or creativity or emotional skill work happening organically in their homes over and over. So that's been really valuable feedback for us, and it feels empowering.
And I would add too, we also understand and realize that there's such a wide variety of ways that families use our kits. So we think of it as almost like this pyramid where at the very baseline, like the basic level, and I don't want to say basic because it's profound and really important, our kits can be used to help regulate the family. So if, for example, things are maybe getting a little stressful in my house, I got to cook dinner, people are crying, I might bring out a kit, and that allows my kids to engage in a sensory experience that helps regulate them, and in the same way helps me then lower a little bit of my stress when I feel like we're both kind of more regulated. So like that is so helpful too, and something that we don't want to not talk about, because that helps the whole family unit. And so that is like a basic way to use our kits. And then we might then just at another moment play with our kids with the kit, but not use that booklet. And that's still so positive, that connection piece. And then at the very top level is when we might use that booklet. And we notice that those times when our kids are engaged or other children are engaged with the kit and doing something with their hands, they're more receptive sometimes to then talking about some of the things. And that's something that I experienced all the time making art alongside kids, is we could not sneak, but like have some of those conversations in a playful way that just brings up so much more learning. And once we're already connected and regulated, like then that learning can really take place. And so our kit can then do all of those things in such a unique way that we just haven't seen other products be able to do. And so, yeah, there's a lot of intention that we put into just all the ways that you can use the kit.
And if I can add like an example to illustrate Emily's point, my oldest, she's almost 6. She is like a deeply feeling kiddo. And sometimes it can feel really uncomfortable or really hard to talk about her feelings directly. And so if we're talking about these 2 dinosaurs that are having a quarrel about whatever it might be, the conversation flows much more freely, as opposed to if I was trying to talk to her directly about maybe a conflict she had with a peer or a sibling that I wouldn't have success with otherwise.
I love that. I really love that. My kids are teenagers, and so I so wish that I had this when they were younger, because you're so right that it sometimes is hard to just have that direct conversation about a specific conflict, about whatever it is. And so I love the intention and so much thought that goes into these kits and heart that goes into these kits, where, like you said, it could just be something sensory to occupy everybody, to lower the emotional temperature of the space, all the way up through using the kits to really build understanding between everybody and open their minds to other things. I mean, this becomes, as kids get older, like the time in the car where you don't have to look at each other, but you can discuss when everybody's looking forward and in motion. I just finished reading a book called 14 Conversations to Have Before 14 or something like that. And it was about these like sort of big conversations. And that was the number one recommendation, is like have these conversations when you're not focused on like looking at each other directly. And so I love that this is a way to bring this to younger kids. And totally honestly, I'm like, oh, well, when you make your teen Zen garden one of these someday, that'll be such a great one to add to like the tween teen households too. So not that they couldn't play with dinosaurs and unicorns, but they might look at me a little funny if I'm like, we're going to have this serious talk playing with little dinosaur toys. But I love it. That is so awesome. So for those that might have a product idea that they believe could make a difference in the lives of kids, do you have any words of wisdom for them as they begin down that road?
Yeah, sure. I would say, we didn't start Present Not Perfect saying this is going to be a product-based business and we know exactly what it's going to look like. We knew what our mission was and what our heart was telling us that we wanted to create, and we knew the goal of what we wanted, like the problem we were trying to solve. And it sort of evolved into something that we're naturally passionate about and that brings our areas of expertise. But I will say, even the name Present Not Perfect, it represents so much of what we're working on personally in our own lives, of just I always say, I think our business would be stuck in buffering mode if it was just me doing Present Not Perfect, because of my perfectionism of wanting to make sure everything was just right and planned out perfectly. And Emily is so good at just being like, let's just do it. Let's do it. And we needed that push. And so I guess that would be my piece of advice, is if you have an idea and you're passionate about it and you have a lot of heart in something that you know is going to help support families and kids, just start. And sometimes we do figure things out as we go.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
Even, I feel like time has gone so fast, and it's wild to reflect that it's been 2 years since we started, but it really allows me to just notice our growth when I see some of those first products that we did put out. So, they've evolved and gotten so much better every time we do them. And so I think my advice for someone trying to get into product-based business, like Abbie was saying, just start and know that it's probably not going to still look like this in a year, in 2 years, and it's going to keep getting better. And just getting that first draft out there, I think just getting that market research to see if people are responding will give you a lot of ideas and clue you into if this is something that can continue and be helpful for other people. I think it really helps when you are connected to the product and you use it and you really believe in it. There's no way we could do this if we didn't use it every day with our kids and really believe in it.
Love it. That is great advice. So our listeners are parents and professionals that work with kids. But for those that don't already work in a mindfulness or emotional development space, besides getting your amazing kits, what advice or tips would you offer them about how to support kids with these practices? You both have so much expertise, and you've talked about regulation and social emotional awareness and emotional literacy. But besides the kits, do you have any other tidbits that you could share about how to start working with kids, whether they're children or they're students, to develop these skills?
One of the most important things would be, if you're wanting to have these conversations with young people, is to really first reflect on yourself and do some of the work yourself, because research shows that the best way to teach emotional regulation strategies is to model it yourself. The data shows that that is the most impactful. And so it can be so hard when we are working with young people who often are dysregulated to not then get dysregulated ourselves. And so we find that the more an adult can do that tough work, and I say tough because it is really hard to reflect on, why is this emotion coming up for me? It can bring up a lot. And so just really doing that work on your own, I think, can be the most helpful. And just remembering, like our company name, Present Not Perfect, it's not going to be this super linear perfect thing all the time. And in fact, like when it's messy, that gives us opportunity to then repair and like model that to our kids as well. That, yeah, I did get really upset, and I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have yelled. Like, it's not going to be this beautiful wrapped in a bow process. And that's just part of being human. And we just always would like to remind people to have that compassion with this topic and with every other thing that you might be going through when working with young children or any age.
That was beautiful. That was great.
Yeah, that was beautiful. I think that it's like driving a car, right? You can read every single manual and every single book and all the research studies on how to drive a car. But if you're not actually practicing driving the car, making mistakes along the way, I'm probably not going to be able to know what to do when I sit down in that car for the first time if I only just read everything, So it's a journey and a process. And having self-compassion for yourself is another huge part of our mission for caregivers and grown-ups as well as kids, to know that we're not going to get it right every time, and that's okay.
I think it's important to mention like the intentionality. When we made these products, yes, it was to support the child, but it really was to speak to the parent or the caregiver or the adult working with the child, to also like soak in some of that, because we really felt like the learning was like really impacting us too when we were reading books with our kids or doing certain activities. And so the goal is to maybe also like hit a point for the parent to be like, oh wow, like, yeah, that is something that I would like to continue to explore within myself and not just with my kid.
Play is not just for kids. Play, it can be powerful for all ages. And it's so important to us as adults to tap into that playful creativity, of our inner children.
I love it. Yeah. And what you said earlier about how like you can work with kids for decades, but until you have your own kids, it's just, you don't know. Like it gave me an insight into what my previous students' families were experiencing and made me realize like I had no idea. Like I could walk into a classroom of 25 kids and make it through a whole entire day and do it exactly as I intended. But then as soon as I had my own kids, I was like, oh, but that is totally different experience. And one of the expressions that I learned early on in parenting was an escalated adult cannot de-escalate a child. And that really is kind of exactly what you're saying, that we really have to have it in ourselves, the regulation, the awareness, all of those skills in order to both help our kids and also model it for them. So I love your messages. That was great. So if you could wave a magic wand on behalf of kids in 2023, what would you wish for them and what messages would you tell them?
That's so funny. I think I've used this question before. It must be the therapist to me. Sometimes I make us reflect on present not perfect goals. And I think I've asked you that. If we had a magic wand with present not perfect. And I love that question because it just takes away like any like barriers. And my initial like word that came up was connection. You know, if I could wave a magic wand, I would want kids to have more opportunities for connection. And I think that came up for me because there's just been so much going on in the world in the last few years that has hindered opportunities for authentic and genuine connections for not only kids, but also adults. And we just find in moments of connection, that is where healing and just amazing things can happen. And so I would love for kids to have more chances to be physically with other people and connect, and especially with their parents or adults in their lives, because we know a lot of adults right now are stressed more than ever. And that in itself can be a barrier to really just be with a child. And so if I had that magic wand, I would say, yeah, more opportunities for connection. And it sounds so basic, but it's so hard to really just be with a young person.
Awesome. That's great.
Yeah. And I would add to that with my magic wand, along with more opportunities for connection, I would add more opportunities for play. I think a lot of parents, at least in the education space, feel, oh, we're behind now because of the pandemic, or we need to catch up. We need to run and we need to schedule our kids into X, Y, Z, and they're not doing enough activities, or they're not, doing enough sports, or whatever it might be. That feeling of that external pressure for parents and educators and professionals in the space probably are feeling that too. And play is such important work too. And I don't know if we allow enough space for that. And so I think my magic wand would allow as much time for play, genuine, creative, expressive play, and also connection to occur for kids and families.
I love that. I will wave my magic wand right alongside you both. That was really beautiful. So, Abbie and Emily, thank you so much for joining me today and for being in it for youth. Please tell listeners how they can reach out to you, how they can find your amazing kits, how they can learn more about you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. We're just always so grateful to connect with someone who's just as passionate about these topics, and locally as well. If people want to find us, our website is www.presentnotperfectllc.com. And you can find us on Facebook, Present Not Perfect, or on Instagram. I think we're present_not_perfect_. And people can always reach out to us directly too. Send us an email, hello@presentnotperfectllc.com.
Great. We will link everything in the show notes so that everybody can easily find you. And I really appreciate you talking with me. I hope this is the beginning of our connection. You guys are wonderful. And to all the listeners, thank you so much for joining us today. We will be back next time with another amazing story of people that are in it for youth. In It for Youth is a Lit Path Studios production. Music is by Inspiring Audio and Pond 5. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And to learn more about this show and all other shows on the network, visit www.litpathstudios.com.